Good morning, everybody. It's 10 o'clock and welcome on what is a very cold and, I believe in Lichfield, snowy day. We are quorate. A sufficient number of councillors have managed to make it to the meeting. Morning, Jill. And we'll start with, I need to read this statement out. I would like to remind everyone present that this meeting will be broadcast live on the internet and will be available for repeated viewing for 12 months. If you are seated in this room, you are deemed to be consented to being filmed, and any contributions to the meeting will be recorded and broadcast. Okay, and we'll start with the agenda. Before we start, welcome to Tom, who's new to the planning team, and hope you enjoy the meeting. We don't charge for tickets. Right, we'll start with apologies, please.
Good morning, Chairman. I've received apologies from Councillor Francis.
Thank you. And item number 2, declarations of interest in accordance with Standing Order number 16.
Chairman, I
David?
don't have a declaration of interest, but Hints Quarry is in my division. I'd just make members aware.
Thank you. So you haven't got a personal or prejudicial interest on that. Okay, and we'll move on to item number 3, please. The minutes of the meeting held on the 15th of July 2021.
Move them, Chairman.
Okay, we've moved by David Smith and seconded by Paul Snape. We all okay with that? Thank you. I'll sign those in a minute. And we'll move into the main body of the meeting, which is applications for permission and reports of the Director of Economy and Skills. And we'll start with item 4A, which is Newbold Quarry, Lichfield Road, Barton under Needwood, and the number is ES 20/06/501MW. And who's going to take this one?
That's me, Chairman.
Thank you, Mike.
Thank you. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So this application, as you can see, there's a long description. Essentially, it's to vary the current planning permission at Newbold Quarry to extend the hours and increase the output. As you can see from this slide, Newbold Quarry lies to the southwest of Burton-on-Trent, between Taton Hill, Dunstall and Barton under Needwood, and immediately to the east of the A38. So the proposals summarised on this slide are to increase output to 1.4 million tonnes per annum by extending the operating hours for mineral extraction in phases 4 and 5 and processing of mineral to 10 p.m. on weekdays. Also to extend the maintenance period to 24 hours per day on weekdays and on a Saturday, to allow 5 lorries to park up after 7 p.m. on weekdays and after 4 p.m. on a Saturday, to operate those extended hours to lower noise limits for mineral extraction and processing, and as a consequence of the increased output, to increase lorry movements to 840 per day. You can see from this aerial photograph that the extraction areas are to the west of the site, and I'll just point that out if I can. So we've got phase 4 in this area here, and phase 5 in this area here. Phase 5 is the last phase of mineral extraction in the quarry. In addition, the processing plant is in this area here. The access road runs along the boundary here and to the roundabout with the A38 here. It's also relevant to note that there's a legal agreement that requires traffic from the site to primarily use the A38 other than for local deliveries. This slide is an extract from the report which zooms in to show phase 4 and 5 and the processing plant area. So again, just to repeat, phase 4 and 4A and 4B are in this area, phase 5 in that area, and as you see on this aerial photograph, this area here and this area here, and then the plant site area down here, and on the aerial photograph here. I would also point out the majority of the objections we've received have come from the residents who live in this area here. So firstly, in terms of the applicant's case, the applicant contends that there is a high demand for the sand and gravel from the quarry, and it is already producing 1 million tonnes per annum. However, a requirement to demonstrate to HS2 that they have the capacity to supply the construction project has led to the application. And they point out that if approved and output increased, then mineral extraction would cease 18 months earlier than currently permitted. So that's about the 31st of July 2028 rather than the end of December 2029. In terms of consultee comments, and they're on pages 12 and 13 of my report, there are no objections from technical consultees, which included the highway authorities, East Staffordshire Borough Council Planning and Environmental Protection, or from the County Council's noise engineer, who is available to members if you've got any technical questions about noise. However, objections were received from Barton and Dunstall Parish Councils. Barton Parish expressed some disappointment that the application had not been discussed at the liaison committee before submission, and they questioned the justification other than commercial reasons and repeated the concerns of nearby residents about additional noise, dust and lorry movements, particularly in the summer. Dunstall Parish referred to the increased noise on the slip or access road and in the buildings, as well as light pollution due to 24-hour working. The objections were queried as they appear to relate to an application coming later on the agenda to do with the concrete products factory. The representations received are summarised on pages 13 and 14 of the report. The application was advertised on-site and in the press. 150 neighbour letters were sent out and 28 representations have been received. As I mentioned earlier, the majority of those representations come from residents and a local business on the A38 near to the processing plant and access road. And the representations raised concerns about the overall impact on quality of life from noise, particularly the empty lorries on the access road passing over speed humps and due to the poor condition of the road, also from the plant sites such as the papping of horns, squeaky conveyors and from reversing alarms, also from dust due to poor site management, light pollution due to the evening operations and poor site management and a poor responsiveness to concerns raised, a failure to comply with planning permission, and in particular what was mentioned was the failure to construct a screen mound in phase 3A, a failure to maintain communication with the local community. Specifically, the liaison committee meetings had not been held due to COVID in 2020. I should just add that they have resumed in this year, and I think 2 meetings have been held. So I'll move on to my observations on pages, which are on pages 15 to 23 of the report, and this looks at 3 areas I considered. Firstly, has any change happened since the permission was issued? The original quarry extension was issued in 2014, but a variation was issued in 2020. Before approving the variation, the latest policy and guidance were considered, and although the government's national planning policy framework was updated this year, those changes are not relevant to consideration of this application. Therefore, there are no material changes in terms of policy to take into account. In terms of changes to the site, I've included some information in the report from a recent submission which details the progress of the site. The submission is currently out for consultation, has not yet been approved, but it indicates that mineral extraction is progressing well, with output, as I said earlier, up to 1 million tonnes per year, whereas restoration by backfilling of some areas with inert waste is behind schedule. In terms of the surroundings, I've referred in my report to the current application to change the hours of the concrete products factory, which is an item later on the agenda. The changes further away include a new high school, a rugby club and housing development to the north of the site. Finally, I've referred to the construction of HS2 through Staffordshire being a major national infrastructure project, generating significant additional demand for mineral as being a material change. And secondly, in terms of consultee comments and representations, the parish and neighbour comments essentially relate to the impact of the additional hours on local amenity, and these concerns were put to the applicant. In terms of noise, the applicant referred to a noise survey that was carried out at the request of technical experts, which confirmed that the background noise level near to the processing plant area is already high due to the A38, that repairs have been carried out and further repairs are planned to the access road, including the removal of speed humps, the lowering of the speed limit to 15 miles an hour, and pointing out that it is not proposed that lorries would enter or leave the site during the additional hours, except for the 5 lorries to park up overnight. The proposals would also operate at a lower noise limit during the additional hours between 7 p.m. and 10 p.m. Finally, the applicant has agreed to a 3-month trial period when noise levels would be monitored during the additional hours to check compliance with the lower limit, and if they are unable to comply, then they have agreed to revert back to the current hours. In terms of dust from the access road and processing plant, the applicant has referred to an approved environmental scheme which includes dust management measures such as the use of a water bowser on the access road, also additional spray bars that have been installed in the processing plant area to suppress dust. In terms of light pollution, potentially made worse by the additional hours, the applicant has pointed out they have received no complaints about the current lighting arrangements and that if necessary, they are necessary for safe working. There's already conditions that require lighting to be installed in a way that doesn't cause glare and minimises light pollution, and it is therefore recommended that an informative be added to remind the applicant of this requirement. Substance was mentioned by one resident, but the applicant has questioned that this is attributable to the site due to the distance from the extraction area. Some local residents mentioned the use of a dangerous access. Neighbours have pointed out that some site staff in cars are leaving the site via a canal bridge to access the northbound A38 rather than using the main site access. The concern was that a later finishing time could increase the risk of an accident. And the applicant has confirmed that the canal bridge is used by site staff and they have had no complaints about this practice. As only one access is approved, it is therefore recommended that the applicant be reminded about this limitation in an informative. Poor site management was also raised, as I mentioned, and the parish and some neighbours expressed a dissatisfaction with a poor responsiveness to their concerns. The applicant explained that under normal circumstances they would hold regular liaison meetings, including a tour of the site, but that these meetings had to be put on hold due to COVID and furloughed staff. As I mentioned earlier, liaison meetings have now restarted with meetings held in March and November. And I just point out as well, there is a requirement in the legal agreement to hold liaison meetings, but understandably the COVID restrictions disrupted those normal arrangements. And thirdly, in looking at this type of application, a Section 73 application as they're known, to vary the planning permission, we would normally look to see what changes need to be made to the conditions that the applicant is seeking to change, but also to review and update, where reasonable and necessary, any other conditions of the permission. And in this case, the changes to the operating hours and lorry movements, in addition to those changes, it is recommended, amongst other conditions, to include a condition specifically to set a limit for output and lorry movements, to set the noise limit during the additional hours, to require the submission of a new noise monitoring scheme for the 3-month trial period, and to require the operating hours to revert back to the original hours if noise monitoring results show the applicant is unable to comply with those limits. So overall, it is concluded that there are no clear and convincing reasons to indicate that the permission should not be granted. The recommended conditions, the recommendation, I should say, and conditions are on pages 24 and 25 of the report. Thank you, Chairman. That concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mike. We'll now move on to other speakers. I note there's no speaker from the Parish Council, and we've got a supporter who's Mr. Joel Jessup. If you would like to speak now and also just introduce yourself to members. Sorry? He's on Teams, is he? Okay. Right. Doesn't actually say that. Oh, it does. Apologies. Joel, can you hear us?
I can, thank you.
Okay. Would you like to start and introduce yourself, please?
Yeah, shall I start my speech as well?
If you introduce yourself first and then do your speech.
Yeah, my name's Joel Jessup. I work for Heaton's Planning Consultancy on behalf of the applicant Aggregate Industries.
Okay, and if you'll start now, please.
Thank you. Dear Chairman and members, firstly, I would like to commend the officer's report that provides a proper planning balance. This application was submitted to the County Council in November 2020. The last 12 months have involved thorough consideration of the application, including its merits and the potential for adverse impacts on residential properties, as well as measures and controls that can be implemented to ensure the development proposed can be delivered in an environmentally acceptable manner. The potential environmental impacts of mineral extraction, mineral processing, and the impacts associated with vehicle movements have been considered. The main aim of the application is to facilitate an increase in the output of New Bold Quarry for the next 2 phases of mineral extraction only. As has been said, these are phases 4 and 5. This application also seeks to extend the operational hours of the quarry on weekdays from between 7 AM and 7 PM to between 7 AM and 10 PM. We think it's important to note that the proposals do not propose any additional HGV movements leaving the site after 7 PM. It is proposed that the extended hours will be primarily used to process stockpiled aggregate ready to be exported from the quarry during daytime operational hours. By increasing the site's output, phases 4 and 5 will be worked quicker and therefore restored quicker to the approved mix of grassland and restoration water bodies. Once mineral extraction within phases 4 and 5 has been completed, the output of the quarry will return to its current rate. The quarry is a strategically important site in the delivery of a steady supply of aggregates for the construction sector, which was not subject to any significant downturn despite the pandemic. New Bold Quarry is currently operating at its maximum output of 1 million tonnes per annum and is still not satisfying market demands. The applicant regrets that New Bold Quarry Liaison Committee, prior to the submission of this application, was cancelled due to the pandemic. Close contact with the Liaison Committee throughout 2020 was also disrupted by staff being furloughed. Liaison Committee meetings at New Bold in the year since this application was submitted have returned and are held every 6 months. The applicant is committed to ensuring that any concerns raised through the Quarries Liaison Committee are properly addressed. We are aware of objections to this application, which relate primarily to the control of noise, dust, light and HGV movements associated with the site. However, we consider that the impacts of the operations will be satisfactorily controlled by the imposition of a comprehensive set of planning conditions. The proposed wording of draft planning conditions 18 and 20 should provide reassurance to both members and the community that the development proposed can proceed without unacceptable impact on the amenity of those residing closest to the quarry. These 2 conditions together ensure that noise emanating from the site during the proposed extended operating hours will not reach unacceptable levels, but if they do reach such levels, site operations will cease. A new planning condition is also proposed, which will introduce a maximum number of daily HGV movements that can arrive and depart the site. The applicant would also like to emphasise that best practice measures, including those within the quarry's environmental scheme, will be adhered to in order to minimise disturbance to the wider community wherever possible. Overall, the potential environmental and amenity effects of the proposal have been considered and there are no objections from any technical consultees. To summarise, this application seeks to increase production to meet existing construction industry demands. The officer's report before you today concludes that the proposed development accords with the development plan. There are no clear and convincing reasons to indicate that the planning application should not be permitted. Thank you for your time today. We support this application's recommendation and respectfully ask the committee to grant planning permission subject to appropriate conditions. Thank you.
Thank you, Joel. I presume you're going to stay online in case any questions come from the committee, please.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you. Now, Speaker 4, which is the local member, is Julia Jessel. Now, Julia can't make it today, but I will read out an email that she sent in about this with her representation. And she says, whilst in my earlier discussions with officers I had serious concerns about this application, in view of the proposed 3-month trial period and other mitigation works that have been undertaken, I have no objections to this application. I further confirm that the Newbold Quarry Liaison meetings have been resumed following a period of lapse due to COVID restrictions. This, I believe, will improve communication and overcome some of the frustrations of local residents and parish councils. So that's a statement from Julia Jessel, and actually covers the third item on our agenda as well, but I'll just refer back to that then. So at this point, I'll open it up to members for any comments, questions they'd like to make. Paul Snape.
Just for Mike's information first, I'm not against this, Mike. Just really, item 48, I just think it's very point 48, it's very wishy-washy. Only one access is currently permitted to the site. It is therefore recommended that the applicant be reminded about the limitation in informative. The word recommended to me isn't strong enough. If there's only one authorised access, they should be told there's only one authorised access and that they cannot use that. Not recommended that they just can't use it. And my second point really is, they're now as a SOP as saying that the quarry will finish on the 31st of July 28, 18 months prior to what it was going to. Can that be written into the this permission that it will close on that date now?
Yeah, thanks for those points. I think the first one, there's already a condition that says that the access, there's one access. What the recommendation is that there's an informative to remind them that there is a condition that says there's only one access. Beyond that, it's more of a regulation matter to get them to comply with that. So that was the reason for recommending an informative. In terms of the adjusting the end date, the problem is that, that they're asking to increase output, but they may not increase output. They want to have the capability to increase. If they don't, then they wouldn't meet that new deadline, which is the reason I worded it in that way. So that was the reason why I haven't recommended a change to the deadline. It's just if they do, that would be a consequence of that. They would finish sooner.
Okay, thank you. That just so if they do come back at any later stage to make more applications, whatever it's going to be, we can basically remind them at that point in the future should the need arise.
Well, actually, it's a point. It's useful to pick up that we are expecting another application to extend the quarry. They've just commenced a public consultation on that, which will end at the end of this year. So it's a useful point to make. So thanks for that.
Have we any other comments from David?
Chairman, could I just clarify my understanding that we are looking at conditions regarding noise and dust and various things. Those conditions must already exist on the site as it is at the moment. So we're only extending those conditions to the new application. And I assume that we've been monitoring the noise and dust levels, because I note there's a comment from the parish council about dust levels, and we must have been monitoring that. So I wonder whether that actually is an issue. The other thing that I was going to just clarify, where we're looking at this being approved for 3 months and for us then to consider it again. My understanding is that the need for the extended hours and the increased rate of extraction is as a result of HS2. So if we were to implement the application as of today, would we find ourselves with the 3 months running out before they've actually started to increase extraction? Chairman.
On the first point, yes, there are existing conditions to do with, and it was mentioned by the agent, there's an approved environmental scheme to manage dust and noise and things like that, following best practice. Water Bowsers, as I said, mentioned in the presentation, they've got spray bars and things like that. There is a noise monitoring scheme in place, but we've recommended a specific scheme for this actual monitoring. There's this actual 3-month trial, so it's more targeted, particularly around in the vicinity of the processing plant, which I think more sensitive in terms of noise. So that's where the scheme is. In terms of the 3-month trial, it's a fair point you make about the trial would only take place when they're actually operating those additional hours. So as long as they're producing up to 10 o'clock at night, that's the point, that's the period that would be monitored. If they're not operating at those times, then the monitoring would be pointless, and therefore we wouldn't accept it. So we want to see that within those additional hours, when they're extracting and processing, that they can comply, and on that basis, if they can comply, they would carry on. If they can't comply, they've agreed that they would revert back to the normal operating hours, and so that was the.
Phil Hudson.
Yeah, I've got concerns about the extra traffic on the A38 and what happens when we have road closures, because it inevitably impacts on the villages nearby. I'm also, it was mentioned that the vehicle movement will primarily be in the daytime, so why are we asking for an increase of time from 0700 to 1900 to 0700 to 2200? Why are we asking for an increase? It won't be needed then if their vehicle movement is going to be earlier than that. And the other thing is, at a previous meeting we discussed the policy from 2017 about the extra extraction of minerals within the county. Does this go against that policy or not? And the other thing, I'm like Councillor Snape, I welcome the fact that if this is permitted, that they will finish extraction 18 months earlier, you know, and I know it's already been mentioned about whether that will happen or not, but that is a positive. But I do have concerns about highways, and I note again that the Highways Department for Staffordshire said they've got no objections and raised no issues. Well, there certainly will be, because we see it now and there isn't extra traffic. Thank you.
Okay. So just to be clear, there's no extra lorry movements in the additional hours. The extra lorry movements are during the day, the normal 6 a.m. till 7 p.m, which they're already allowed to do. So that's why the application is only to allow extraction and processing in the extra hours, but they would take them out during the normal daytime. Because an example being that if they want to supply HS2, they have to supply them during the hours that HS2 are operating, and they're under a code of practice in terms of their operations. In terms of the implications of those extra traffic movements, as I say, there's a legal agreement already in place that requires them to use the A38. Obviously, if the A38 was closed, then they'd have to find an alternative route, but that's down to the nature of the A38 and when it's closed, but that's no different to any other traffic on the road, in truth. But primarily, and I think, I think from the traffic assessment information that was provided, it's over 90%, if not more, goes via the A38 anyway, and they're already operating to 1 million tonnes a year. So it's a significant increase, but they're already operating to a high level. I'm not quite clear about the point you made on the policy side, but what I would say is, yes, it's good that the extraction will finish the site sooner. With that proviso, there is an application in, subject to being approved, to extend the site. It's a relatively small extension that would be proposed, but that might extend the site slightly longer. The other thing is for members appreciate, though, that HS2 is going to draw a lot of mineral out of the ground, which means we might have to plan for more mineral in the future, sooner rather than later. So it's all well and good that this site finishes sooner, but we might have to find a replacement in due course from a mineral planning perspective. So just to understand that as well. Thank you.
Mike.
Thank you, Chair. And yeah, very comprehensive report. And I'm particularly interested in the observations from on page 15. One of the things I noted earlier in the report is that maintenance operations are currently running from 0600 to 2000, and the proposal is to move it to 24 hours. I'm interested as to why there was nothing in your observations in the report, because that's quite, I'm more interested in, from your knowledge, disturbance, noise, etc. If it's absolutely minimal, then that will placate any issues. But overall, and based on the support of the local member given today, and that it is a 3-year report, I do support this application in whole. But I am interested in the piece about the maintenance operation running for 24 hours.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. It's a fair point. I think from that perspective, I think some of the maintenance, or a lot of the maintenance, is carried out inside a building. Obviously, there is plant conveyors. I mean, it's mentioned in the report. The criticism of squeaky conveyors. Well, they can only be maintained because they're outside. The conveyor comes from what they call the field, comes from the extraction area in, so it's further away. So if they're maintaining that, it's further away from residential property anyway. And I say around the processing plant area, they have a lot of that maintenance is carried out in a building. So whether that be the plant that's moving around, it would go into the building to be repaired. So other than that, I don't think that in itself will cause the biggest issue. It was explained to me that inevitably they're producing 1 million tonnes a year. To increase that yet further, there's obviously a heavy demand on the plant and equipment. So that's why they need to increase that maintenance regime to achieve that. But it still would be monitored from a noise perspective as well. So that's the point to make on that.
Jill.
Thank you, Chair. I've noticed in the report that there's mention of the creation of 7 new jobs because of the extra shifts. Can it be confirmed if they are extra jobs, actually? Thank you.
That's the next item, my later item. It's the same quarry, but it's an application a bit later on. Thank you.
All right. Just from my point of view, we've got a recommendation, and that is to permit subject to conditions, and it does say in brackets including a 3-month trial, which is obviously one of the conditions. Could you clarify for me, because I'm slightly sort of I got lost in the conversation. When will this 3 months start, and when will it? Obviously, it will finish 3 months later, but when will it start?
Okay. So first off, we would have to approve. They would have to submit a scheme to monitor the noise during the additional hours, and then they would only monitor the noise when the additional hours were actually taking place, so that they're extracting in those additional hours and processing in those additional hours, and that would be the period. So only when that had started, and obviously we wouldn't count any monitoring if they weren't operating between 7 and 10 o'clock, so it wouldn't count. So the 3 months, as long as they're operating in that 3-month trial, those additional hours, that's when it would start and finish.
So in terms of the Planning Commission, the extra hours won't start until they've got the monitoring in place. Yeah. And have you any idea, for residents who might be watching, what sort of timescale we're talking on that?
Well, that's down to the applicant to submit that scheme. And for all I know, they could be preparing it now and be ready, wanting to do it. But as was mentioned earlier, the demand from HS2 locally may not arise for a while yet. So they might have time to put that scheme in place, but obviously they won't be monitoring it until they've actually started those additional hours.
So we haven't got a start date? No. Yeah, okay, thank you. Just to clarify that one. Have we got any proposals from the floor? We've got a proposal to move it by David Smith, a proposal seconded by Paul Snape and thirded by Mike. Could we have a show of hands, please? Okay, I think that's unanimous. Thank you very much, and we'll move on now to application 4B, which is Hints Quarry, Watling Street, Hints, and the number there is L19 /04/805 -808 MW. Now, at the start, Vice Chairman David Smith did say that he's the local member, but he's got no interest, so he will be allowed to comment on the presentation and obviously vote at the end. Could I please have the the presentation by Matt Griffin? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. Morning, members. This report relates to a planning application submitted by Tarmac and Cemex UK Operations Limited for amendments to planning conditions to allow for an increase in output of sand and gravel from Hints Quarry. The proposed increase in output is required due to contracts secured by Tarmac to supply sand and gravel to concrete making plants and aggregates associated with HS2 works, as well as to maintain supplies to the general market. To be. Sorry about this. It seems
just
to have
got a technical issue.
Technical issue with the slides and the movement of them. Yep. Thanks, Chris.
Matt, are we ready?
Yes.
Could I ask you, please, just to speak up a little bit as well?
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
So yes, general location is shown on this plan here. Hints Quarry is located approximately 4 kilometres west of Tamworth and 6 kilometres southeast of Lichfield. This is the extract of the plan accompanying the report. So in more detail, the key features to note are the access onto the Watling Street. So you can see where the cursor is, you can see the Watling Street there, and noting that Watling Street is the former A5 as it passes through Weeford Village. No lorries are allowed to pass through Hints Village, which is to the east of the quarry's access onto Watling Street. The route of the high-speed railway, HS2, is situated to the west of the site, and construction traffic associated with the HS2 project will be also using Watling Street to access the construction area for the railway. The site layout is shown on this aerial photograph and shows the extent of the quarry, which is in fact two former quarries which are now merged into one operational quarry. The processing plant is within the southern part of the site. The current extraction area is the area referred to as the northwestern extension, and about just under half of the reserve has been recovered within this area. At current rates of extraction, the reserves would be exhausted by October 2025. This is a photograph of the processing plant at Hints Quarry. Exports of sand and gravel are already permitted up to a maximum of 700,000 tonnes per annum, and the processing plant is allowed to operate from 6 in the morning to 10 at night, Mondays to Fridays, and 6 in the morning to 1 o'clock in the afternoon on Saturdays. So the proposals put forward by the applicants are summarised on the slide there. So you can see that the increase is there from 700,000 tonnes up to 1 million tonnes per annum. Secondly, the intention would be to extend the working operations for HG, the lorries, with an additional hour in the morning, so starting from 6 a.m, and in the evening up to 8 p.m, Monday to Friday, and an additional hour in the morning on Saturdays from 6 a.m, and in the afternoon on Saturdays till 2 p.m. As a consequence, the current limit, the maximum limit on lorry movements would increase from 350 per day to 450 per day. No objections are now made by any technical consultees, although additional information and revisions to the proposals have been made to address the concerns of National Highways, the County Council's noise engineer, and the District Council's environmental health officer. Weeford Parish Council object to the proposals due to the additional lorry impact and extended hours. The key factor for the proposals is HS2 and the contracts that Tarmac has for the supply of concreting materials and other aggregates. Tarmac operates Hints and Orwell's quarries, so this plan here shows you the location of Orwell's quarry in the further to the north along the Trent Valley off the A38, and there's Hints quarry off the A38 but connected via Watling Street. It's Orwell's quarry that is being used to supply concreting plants on the HS2 construction route. So this plan shows you the route of HS2 phase 1, and Tarmac supply concreting plant down in Birmingham at Washwood Heath. There's other plants further to the south, one at Meriden and one even further down off the plan. The intention is to supply from Orwell's, but then Hints would supply other aggregates used for HS2 works, but Hints would also be used to meet the contracts in the general market that would otherwise have been supplied by Orwell's quarry. More than 30 representations have been received raising concerns about the proposal, including a letter from Christopher Pincher, MP. The main concerns relate to the adverse impacts of additional lorries on the highway network in terms of speed and road safety, including the effect on other road users, for example, cyclists and horse riders. Noise from traffic, as it would affect residential amenity, is an issue. And on that slide, you can see the nature of properties as you proceed along the Watling Street. So on top left is a property situated near the A5, A38 junction, and then going eastwards, then there's various pictures as they progress, top right, bottom left, and then you have a picture there of the quarry access off Watling Street on the bottom right. Other issues are air quality, dust and vehicle emissions, and then residents raise concerns about the cumulative effects from increased traffic with the additional traffic associated with HS2 works. Since writing the report, an objection has been received from residents on Watling Street, demonstrating their concerns about traffic impacts based on current experience, taking into account the frequency of lorry movements, the speed of vehicles, and issues relating to sheeting and parking on Watling Street. Objections are based on an independent survey carried out on behalf of residents. So, the first part of the observations in the report considers whether relevant national and development plan policies and other material considerations have changed significantly since the original grant of permission in 2018. In this matter, it's concluded that there have been no material changes to planning policy guidance or to the site since the 2018 permission was issued that would affect the original permission. However, the demand arising from HS2 construction is a material consideration to the application. The second main heading, that's in dealing with paragraphs 54 to 80 of the report, considers the matters raised by consultees and in the representations received. In relation to the proposed increase in traffic, it is concluded that subject to conditions, the proposals would not give rise to any unacceptable adverse impacts in terms of highway safety. This conclusion takes into account the views of National Highways, dealing with the strategic highway network, and the local highways authority, who would manage the Watling Street. Regarding the speed of lorries, it is noted that as a consequence of HS2 works, further speed restrictions on Watling Street are being considered. In relation to the proposed extended hours, the applicant has reduced the times of proposed extended hours. So instead of lorries being proposed to enter or leave up to 10 o'clock in the evening, the movements would now cease on or before 8 p.m. Also, lorry movements would cease at 2 p.m. on a Saturday rather than 4 p.m. as originally proposed by the applicants. These changes have been proposed to overcome concerns about late evening movements and the effect on recreational use during Saturday afternoons. It is concluded that subject to the conditions recommended, the revised hours for transporting mineral would not give rise to an unacceptable adverse impact on local amenity. Furthermore, the proposals would facilitate a steady and adequate supply of minerals in connection with meeting the demands from a national infrastructure project, and also provide a material planning benefit that outweighs the objections. The third heading in the observation section considers the need to review and update other conditions attached to the current permission. The recommendation, as well as addressing the proposed changes required by the applicants, makes additional recommendations to update conditions, as you will see in the recommendation on pages 51 to 52 of the report. The recommendation is to permit the amended conditions as stated in the report, including limits to the rate of movement during the proposed extended hours. The limit would be increased to 1 million tonnes. Hours of movements would be extended from 6 to 8 in the evening, Monday to Friday, and from 6 in the morning to 2 on a Saturday. The number of lorry movements would be increased so that movements to and from the site would not exceed 450 per full working day, 226 movements on a Saturday because of the reduced hours. And as I say, there would be a restriction on the early morning movement of 26 movements per hour, which would also apply to the hours 1900 to 2000 hours. That concludes my presentation, Chair.
Thank you very much, Matt. We'll now move on to the supporter. There's no parish council representation, and that supporter is Malcolm Lawyer, who's here in person. I'm reading my notes properly this time.
Chair.
Oh, apologies. I'm not reading my notes properly. We have an objector, and that is Stuart Hollyman, and I presume that's the way to pronounce your name. Stuart, are you there?
Good morning. Yes, I am.
Morning, Stuart. Apologies for missing you out there for a second.
Nodded.
Would you like to introduce yourself? And you've got 5 minutes.
Good morning. I'm Stuart Holyman and speak on behalf of the residents and businesses within the Wearford Village. Shall I continue? Hints Quarry is in Hints Village. However, for over a decade, Wearford Village has endured the full brunt of access to the quarry due to the speed and weight restrictions imposed through Hints Village. The applicant today has applied for the variation to the 3 current planning permissions, and today we look to the planning committees for their support. The evidence that has been provided by us was gathered before COVID-19 and has been a continual detriment to the residents during and after lockdown, and sadly is still today. Quarry HGV movements are as early as 5:30 a.m, 1.5 hours earlier than the current agreed time. In considering the new proposed hours based on current evidence, we ask how are these potential 15.5 hours of HGV movements fair and justifiable to accept without affecting the well-being and mental health of residents. Our evidence shows many HGVs leave the quarry showing no signs of wheel washing. They are unsheeted also. The roads lack regular watering and the road sweeping in both directions to comply with dust management. The dust each HGV generates is a significant contribution to air pollution and will potentially double its impact if this application is improved. Dust and stones are discarded from HGVs travelling from the quarry and are constantly causing damage to other vehicles, property, and further diminishing the air quality. We ask, why is this not being managed and policed by the applicant as the conditions state? The lay-by on approach to the quarry entrance is used by drivers to discharge mixed sand, gravel, water, sludge from the empty HGV chambers to maximise their unladen weight before entering the quarry. Again, we ask, why is this contamination allowed to foul the public highway and the drains to maximise the carriage at the expense of the local council and its residents? We challenge the applicant's traffic noise surveys. It states that Rock Hill and Bucks Head Cottage are the last residing properties to be affected by noise. This is categorically untrue. Why has Wearford Village been excluded? The results were gathered to the left of the quarry entrance where HGV movements are prohibited. Why were the surveys not carried out on a section of road that the vehicles are allowed to travel, i.e. past Wearford Crossroads, possibly enduring wet conditions as this further increases noise when passing properties, but providing more accurate and honest results of its current noise pollution and then its projected increase. Our funded ATC report records HGV speeds up to 70 miles per hour and 80 miles per hour for cars. As evidence, the enormous speed differentials on this road due to frequent farm vehicles, field access, and now HS2 traffic, urgent reduction of the current speed limit is needed for all regular road users, Heart of England Way, horse riders, cyclists, runners, pedestrians, most having to take regular risks due to no pathways. This has now been raised separately for further support to protect lives. We ask why the applicant, pursuant to the obligation set out in the S106 agreement dated October 2018, to the best of our knowledge has still made no contact with Parish Council, nor its residents to be part of the formal liaison committee, allowing then such members to voice their concerns of the continued detriment residents continually suffer. We conclude from the evidence provided, objections received and additional information submitted, we believe the applicant is currently in breach of definition of consent condition 17A, 21, 22 and 26 as Wearford was excluded as a noise sensitive location, and most probably in breach of condition 20, but we lack access to condition 53 to confirm this. We know Staffordshire County Council strives to provide duty of care to all its residents, as with recent applications that were approved for said and seized in quarries. enforcing conditions to safeguard their communities. Therefore, we request the support of the County Council not to approve this planning application, but to ensure the planning application adheres to its current planning permissions. Weeford Village has now to endure the daily disruption from HS2 construction, and if the County Council feels this proposal needs further consideration due to government dictation and requirements, we please ask you to seek alternative solutions from the applicant, but none further to demise the lives of Weeford residents and businesses. Thank you all.
Thank you, Mr. Hollyman. Obviously, I gave you a little bit extra time there just to finish your speech. So
apologies and thank you.
Thank you. And we'll now move on to speaker number 3, who's the supporter on this. Sorry for the premature start, but Malcolm Lawyer, could you please introduce yourself and then we'll start the speech.
Malcolm Law, Head of Strategic Planning and Geology for the Midlands region of Tarmac.
Thank you. Would you like to start? 5 minutes, please.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair and members of the committee. Tarmac and Cemex are the operators of Hints Quarry. The sand and gravel produced at Hints is a high-quality product, and a large proportion of future output will be supplied to a number of important development projects throughout Staffordshire and the West Midlands. Tarmac have secured a proportion of the supply of ready-mix concrete to HS2, thereby requiring increased aggregate supplies to ready-mix plants. Hints, along with other assets in the county, such as Aulus, are being tailored to meet the demand from this nationally significant project, as well as continuing to meet the demands of general construction market. It is proposed to increase the output from Hints to 1 million tonnes per annum, with an attendant increase in HGV activity and hours of activity for HGV movements. Mr. Griffin has already given you a detailed summary of the application, and I won't seek to reiterate that. Technical reports provided in respect to the proposals have proven that the proposed changes can be undertaken in accordance with best practice guidance and fully accord with the development control policy. Tarmac is engaged with the EHO for Lichfield and the County Council's own noise specialist and have made concessions on the hours of HGV activity, reducing the intended hours from 6 in the morning until 10 at night to 6 in the morning till 8 in the evening, thereby minimising the risk of disturbance in evening hours. As part of the submitted application, Tarmac has also sought to increase HGV activity from the currently permitted 350 movements per day, that is 175 in, 175 out, to up to 500 per day, 250 in, 250 out. In response to the concession on working hours highlighted above, it is now proposed to limit the activity to 450 movements, 225 in, 225 out. Consistent with the current arrangements on site, we will continue to liaise with neighbours, including the crematorium, to minimise impact as far as practicable. The site benefits from a liaison committee, which is used as a forum for both Tarmac to update local community on progress and allow opportunities for nearby residents to express any concerns with the operations on site. Historically, Tarmac received very few complaints regarding its operations at Hints. However, since lodging this application, some concerns have been raised by neighbours, which I'll comment on as follows. Firstly, both Tarmac and Cemex have a driver behaviour policy that is provided to all new and returning drivers that clearly sets out hours of working and expected behaviours in and around the site, including clear instructions regarding sheeting of loads and use of lay-bys along Watling Street. Secondly, as regards to HGV routing, there is an existing routing obligation enforced through the Section 106 agreement for the site that will remain in place, ensuring that HGVs do not turn left out the site along Watling Street. These will be maintained as part of this proposal. By approving the application, the Council will enable operations at Hints to fulfil its primary objective of supplying aggregate to construction projects consistent with the Council's own mineral plan, whilst also replacing capacity at other sites such as Aulus, which will be primarily focused on supplying HS2. For the reasons set out in your officer's report and the points I've outlined above, Tarmac would endorse the officer's recommendation to approve, subject to planning conditions. Thank you.
Mr. Lawyer, thank you very much for your submission. We've got two local members, one of which is David Smith, who I'll invite to speak in a minute. Also, Alan White, who's the leader of the council. I did speak to him this morning, and he said that he's more than happy to leave it in the hands of David Smith, who's actually got the larger part of this application. David, would you like to speak at all?
Yes, Chairman. I would like to make some comments as the local member, particularly. One should bear in mind that the road that is the contentious location of access was in fact the main A5 prior to the Hints bypass. So historically it's carried very, very heavy amounts of traffic and was a nightmare. I have to say that the road now is comparatively quiet, and it does have speed limits on it, which the current volume of traffic, apart from heavy vehicles, is comparatively low, with heavy vehicles coming from the quarry. I have great sympathy with the residents of both Weeford and Hints. I think that their concern is particularly relating to the implications that this approval will bring. Hints in particular at the moment is going through a very, very torrid time with vehicles accessing the HS2 site, and I think that that must prompt tremendous concerns about what future of sand and gravel being taken on site to complete the workings that are going on. So I can very, very much understand why the concern of the community is possibly not so much the approval of this application, but the implications that this application has as far as the future of Hints and Weeford are concerned. In terms of the conditions which we're applying to the application, for all vehicles to have to turn right up to the main island, that takes them away from the Hints houses that are actually on Watling Street. So they're not disturbed by the movement of vehicles. And although it will affect the houses that face onto Watling Street, they are not a great number, and certainly it won't make any impact on those houses of anything like the day as it was before the Hints bypass was open. So although I have sympathy with them, I don't think that the impact is going to be that serious as far as they're concerned. And I would just reiterate that I think it's the implications of the approval of this application of what it may have as far as HS2 construction is concerned, rather than the additional movement of vehicles. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, David. At this point, I'm going to open up the discussion to the committee, as it has got quite large implications on local residents. Does anyone want to say anything on this? I've got Mike Sutherland for a start, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just to the officer, really. On page 44, paragraph 59, I read with note, to mitigate the impact of the traffic impact, it's being suggested by residents that access to the quarry could be provided directly off the A5 trunk road. Notwithstanding the feasibility of providing an access onto the A5, National Highways have confirmed they are constrained in accepting an access off the A5. If I may, could I ask, are you able to comment on this response from National Highways? Thank you.
Yes, Councillor. The suggestion came through a number of representations that were received, and it was repeated by the local MP representing his constituents about this potential remedy that could be provided by the getting a direct access onto the new A5. The issue there is that the national highways now refer to government circulars which talk about limitations on access and creating new access onto the trunk road network. So it was something that, as a suggestion, they would not support. That was the response that we received.
Could I just jump in and add that we've got to remember as well the site's only got a few years to go, so the cost of creating a new access onto a trunk road would be quite significant for something as...
Thank you for pointing that out. I actually thought that myself, but the clarity didn't come out in the report. Thank you for that.
Thank you. Paul Snape.
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank the officer for the quality and the presentation of the report? I've no planning ground subject, so I will be supporting this, but I'd like just to pass some comments. Demand from HS2 base is going to change the whole of that part of Staffordshire. There's no doubt about it. We as a county council were against HS2, so if I just put that really into the mill, because we knew this was going to happen, not just this road, but all the roads in the region, going as far as Stone, really. It's going to cause very similar problems. I'll just really ask, it's really to echo what Councillor Smith has said. It's to echo that any conditions that we do impose are implemented quite in detail. Air quality and noise are monitored, and that the liaison committee meets regularly, and that the company listen to them, and that it acts on their complaints. Businesses such as this one must work and listen to this committee, and it must take on the advice that we're given to them. We're supporting what they're doing because we know it's business. Tarmac are a big company. We need them to employ our people across the county and the country, so we know exactly what they're doing. But as Stuart Hollyman says, there have been problems for many years at Weeford and on the A5. We can all remember what it was like before the bypass did come in there and the volumes of traffic, and it has gone down. And I suppose if you live in Weeford and on the A5, now you don't want to go back to the olden days. You've got your property there and you want to be able to live in peace the way it is, really. So the two have got to work together. So all I'm really asking is that we, as an enforcement body, do enforce conditions that are there and make it able for the people of Weeford and the surrounding area to live in peace with the company.
Thank you, Paul. Obviously, we haven't decided whether we're passing this or not yet, but I do agree that we do need to make sure that if it is passed, conditions are complied with.
Everything I've said is conditional on it going through.
Yes. Okay. Could I please bring in Richard Cox next?
Thank you, Chairman. I think obviously what we've got here is a consequence of the HS2 project, and it's something, as has been alluded to, is something maybe that we have to live with for the period of construction. But I think we do have to bear in mind those residents that are going to be blighted by it. And I think we do have to consider in terms of the hours and so forth. But of course the demand is going to be greater. The demand for gravel is going to be not only probably for the HS2, but it's pretty obvious for the building construction of houses and so forth, which is also going to have an impact on the whole area. But obviously it is my concern is those residents. There was reference made to reduction in speed on Watling Street. That is absolutely fine, but it's about enforcing and ensuring that enforcement is possible, because it's all very well making that. It's just whether that is something that we can do. So it was just, that was really my question. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Matt, do you want to answer that?
Yes. Unfortunately, I can't be too specific about what the reductions will be, but Watling Street is subject to a lot of changes, as the local residents will know, that in terms of what how access will be facilitated to the HS2 works, and it's as a consequence of that, the implications of those works, that there's ongoing discussions about further speed reductions. The speed is reduced to 50 miles per hour, but something lower than that obviously is something that might be arising from the HS2 work. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm sure David Smith wants to make a comment as well.
Only a couple of points, Chairman, if I may. If I can reassure the committee that we have very, very regular meetings with HS2 and we'll monitor what the situation is regarding traffic movements to the site, but that's not subject to this application. The other point that I was interested in that has been raised regarding the speed limit. The speed limit on that road is an existing speed limit of 50 miles an hour. I've not been consulted as the local member as far as highways are concerned about a reduction of that speed limit, and I would have thought that on what is an open country road with a few sporadic houses along, the speed limits are all very, very well, but they have to be considered in the light of, will people observe those speed limits if they consider them to be unreasonable? I think that the probability is that a 50-mile-an-hour limit on that section of road is not unreasonable, and I don't think if it was reduced to, say, 40 or even 30, anybody would comply with that. It's a straight, clear road. It's quite wide. It's an main highway. I don't think that certainly if I was being asked to contribute to a reduction in the speed limit, I would feel that that was a necessity from my point of view. So I don't think that a change in the speed limit is feasible. Thank you, Chairman.
We're sort of veering slightly away from the planning here. All I can ask is that if there is anything from the planning department around speed limits, that David Smith and Alan White as local members are involved and included in those discussions.
Yeah, thank you, Chairman. I was going to make that point briefly, that I understand the concerns about the traffic speeds, but it is a traffic regulation matter, whether that be the actual speed limit or the enforcement side. It's not a matter for planning, just to be clear about that. I think that's important to recognise that. Thank you.
Could I make a couple of points? And first one is please relay that information about speed discussions in the future to ensure that the two local members are involved in those discussions. I'm slightly sort of repeating myself again here, but when will this start, if it's given permission? And the second one, and I've not heard or missed it, and perhaps David will know the answer to this, is there a liaison group that meets with the quarry? And could I ask officers that then?
Yes, Chair. With the a legal agreement that was agreed in 2018, just before the COVID pandemic, there's a requirement there for the operator of the site to arrange for a liaison committee. Clearly, there is a requirement for that, and that should be implemented as soon as it can. Yes.
So just again, is there in the original planning permission, was there a liaison committee as a condition?
So on the back of the 2018 consent that we're considering now, yes, there is a requirement for a liaison meeting, but I don't believe that's actually operated for since that agreement was made.
So in a way, the conditions say there should be a liaison committee. There isn't a liaison committee. Can I ask that as part of the conditions of the present planning permission, and whatever happens today, that a liaison committee is put together ASAP, because local members do need to be involved in this, and the previous application local member did say how important that was, and I feel personally that that's something we should be looking at and enforcing. I'm sorry to throw that into the mix.
I just jump in to say, Matt's explained that there's already that requirement there. It's part of a legal agreement. I think the best we can do is remind the applicant of that, because there's already an undertaking. John could probably endorse that. We do have somebody representing the applicant here. We could ask that question. Will they arrange to get that liaison committee in place? Yes, there has been COVID, which may have disrupted that arrangement. The site has been operating for a number of years without that legal requirement, but the latest permission from 2018 introduced it because it's something we do want to do, and the members have obviously supported that on a number of occasions for big sites like this. It's something we introduced. They haven't done it, and I think it would be helpful, particularly with the comments we've heard from local residents today, that that liaison committee is in place, albeit that the site has got a limited life left. I think that the next few years, where it will be more intensively, production will be increased. I think it's important that that liaison committee is in place, and that perhaps Mr. Law can confirm that that will be arranged as soon as possible.
Can I first of all bring John Rowe in on this? We've got a legal agreement here which is not being implemented. What's the situation as far as Staffordshire County Council is concerned?
Well, if a liaison committee is already required pursuant to a Section 106 agreement, then that is a legal requirement. So am I understanding correctly, there is already a Section 106 obligation to run a liaison committee?
Can I bring Paul Snape in, because he indicated?
Can I just then suggest an additional condition, that this doesn't go through until the liaison committee is set up and running?
Officers.
I think it's to be truthful, it's an enforcement matter. I mean, it already exists, so it's no different to any existing conditions, that they should be doing it anyway. So it doesn't directly impinge on this in that sense. It should already be in place.
Can I just ask why we're not enforcing it then, please?
Paul, I think this is something that sort of crawled out of the woodwork, and it's something we do need to ask. And as chair, I'm asking the committee, the officers, to look at this. I'm going to bring Mr. Lawyer in a second, but David first.
I'll go along. Sorry, can I just say I'll go along with you as chair on that matter, so that you liaise then with the committee, the officers, to try and sort liaison committee out. Is that all right, Chair?
Thank you.
Chairman, if the applicant would like to make contact with me, I'm very, very happy to meet with them to look at how we'd form a liaison committee, and if they want me to, I'm happy to chair it. Chairman, the other thing that I would say is that this application, although it's close to Alan White's division, is 100% in my division, so that may make things a little easier.
Mr. Lawyer, sorry to sort of put you on the spot here. As chairman, I think I can ask these questions. Why haven't you got a liaison committee at the moment, and are you going to put one in place as soon as possible?
Thank you, Chair. I was aware of this point, that this point was likely to be raised today, and I checked with the quarry manager yesterday. Apparently we did have a liaison meeting just pre-COVID, but there haven't been any meetings since then. Whether you could call it a liaison committee, it's probably not been that formal in truth, but there was a meeting involving local parish council, etc., pre-COVID. No one from Weeford was actually invited to that meeting, so I can give a commitment today to invite residents from Weeford to attend that meeting when we set up in a more formal way as COVID restrictions ease.
Can I be more specific and say, will you set up a liaison meeting, not just one, but regular ones? Probably, I think 6 months seems to be the norm. Will you set up a liaison meeting, and will you liaise initially with the local member, which is David Smith, please?
Yeah, yes, I can confirm that.
Thank you for that. And this is webcast, so
That's fine.
That's wonderful. Okay, can I therefore move on to some sort of proposals? Paul? So we've got a proposal from Paul Snape, seconded by Mike Sutherland. Should we have a show of hands, please? That's unanimous. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Lawyer. Right, we'll now move on to item 4C, which is Newbull Quarry, again, Litchfield Road, Barton under Needwood, and this application number is ES.21/01/501. Could we have the presentation with Mike? Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So, as this slide explains, this is an application to vary the current plan permission at Newbull Quarry Concrete Products Factory to extend the 24-hour weekday production to include Saturdays and Sundays, to allow mobile plant to operate outside on the extra days, and to allow deliveries on the extra days. As you are aware from my presentation earlier, Newbull Quarry lies to the southwest of Burton-on-Trent, between Taton Hill, Dunstall, Barton and Needwood, and immediately to the west of the A38. The factory lies within the quarry, and this aerial photograph shows the location on the eastern side of the quarry. The factory shares the same access to the A38 roundabout as the quarry and other ancillary operations, and is tied to the same legal agreement that requires traffic to use the A38 except for local deliveries. This slide summarises the proposals, which are in more detail on pages 60 and 61 of my report. So the applicant wishes to carry out a 12-month trial to increase output by extending the current 24-hour weekday operations to include Saturday and Sunday, by extending the lorry movement hours to allow 3 bulk tanker deliveries on a Sunday and a public bank holiday, and to extend the time when mobile plant can operate outside to include a Saturday and Sunday between 7 p.m. and 7 a.m. And this slide zooms in to show in a bit more detail where the quarry, the concrete products factory is, and if I just get a pointer on here, it might help. So I've highlighted here, that's the factory. You'll be aware from my earlier presentation, this is the processing plant area, and the representations we've had have come from 7 residents in this area here. It's worth pointing out at this point that the factory is ancillary to the quarry and is linked to the life of the quarry and must be removed as part of the restoration of the quarry. I've also mentioned that we've had 7 representations and they're from that group of properties that I've highlighted here in this area. In terms of the applicant's case, the applicant contends that there's a high demand for the concrete block pavers, and they wish to maximise the productivity of the factory by removing the downtime on a Saturday and Sunday. The additional time would also allow 7 additional staff to be employed in an extra shift. In terms of consultee comments, there are no objections from technical consultees, which included East Staffordshire Borough Council's planning and environmental protection officers. However, an objection has been received from Dunstall Parish, and Dunstall Parish referred to the impact on amenity of local residents due to the increased noise, dust and light pollution. The representations, which are summarised on page 64 of my report, the application was advertised on site and in the press, 35 neighbour letters were sent out and 7 representations were received. As I mentioned earlier, the representations come from those residents and a local business on the A38 near to the processing plant and access road. The representations raised concerns about the overall impact on quality of life from the traffic, noise, the vibration, light pollution, dust churned up along the access road. So in terms of my observations, I've considered three areas. Firstly, have there been any changes since the permission was issued? Well, the factory was first granted plan permission in 1998 and was varied in June. Latest variation was in June 2018. This is a correction. In my report, I referred to June 2017. By approving the variation, the latest policies and guidance were referred to. Again, although the government's national planning policy framework was updated this year, the changes are not relevant to the consideration of this application. Therefore, there are no material changes in terms of policy to take into account. In terms of the site, it already operates 24 hours a day, Monday to Friday, and has conditions to control noise, lighting, and to limit the use of mobile plant outside after 7 p.m. That's to 2 pieces of mobile plant, typically a forklift truck and a wheel loader that can operate outside after 7 p.m. until 7 a.m. In terms of surroundings, I've referred to the application earlier on the agenda as to the changes to output and hours from the quarry and the progress of the quarry, so they were in my earlier report. In terms of parish comments and representations, the parish and neighbours' comments essentially relate to the impact of the hours on local amenity, and these concerns were put to the applicant. One of the comments was the length of time of the trial, and the applicant has explained that the 12-month trial would enable them to monitor noise throughout the year, after which the operations would revert to the current hours. The applicant would also be able to employ a 4th shift and monitor the noise in accordance with an approved scheme, and would cease and investigate and mitigate if noise was found to be exceeding the limit during the trial period. And unlike the earlier application, this factory is already operating 24 hours a day, and as the change would therefore be less significant, and as the trial was part of a proposal that were consulted on, the 12-month trial is considered to be acceptable. In terms of the impact on amenity, the applicant responded by pointing out that the trial is to allow the effects to be monitored, and that the proposals are in response to an increased demand to allow the factory to operate more efficiently and would allow 7 additional staff to be employed. No additional lorry movements would take place outside of the current permitted hours, except for 3 bulk tanker deliveries on a Sunday or public bank holiday. The lorry movements would represent about 6% of the current total movements from the quarry. And the nature of the operations inside a building with only storage of blocks outside means that dust is not generally an issue. As the factory already operates through the night, no changes are proposed to current lighting. And finally, the applicant has agreed to limit out-of-hours tanker deliveries to 3 between 8 a.m. and 1 p.m. on a Sunday and on a public bank holiday. And therefore it was reasonable to conclude that, subject to the recommended conditions, the proposed changes would not give rise to an unacceptable adverse impact on local amenity. Finally, as I explained in my previous report, as this application is to vary a current planning permission, known as a Section 73 application, after making the approved changes to the planning conditions, it is also reasonable to review and update the existing conditions, the other existing conditions. And in this case, changes to the operating hours and tank, after those changes, it is recommended that amongst other conditions to be updated, there should be a requirement to submit a new noise monitoring scheme for the 12-month trial period, and to require the operating hours to revert to the original hours at the end of that period. So overall, it is concluded there are no clear and convincing reasons to indicate that permission should not be granted. So, Chairman, on the recommendation and conditions are on page 70 and 71 of the report, which is the recommendation is to permit, subject to those conditions, for the 12-month trial period. Thank you, Chairman.
We have no objectors, no representation from the parish council. We do have a supporter Selina Gaskarth via Teams. Are you there, Selina?
Hello, yes, I am.
Hello there. Would you like to introduce yourself and then we'll start the 5-minute timer?
Yes, of course, thank you. Good morning, Chairman and members. My name's Selina Gaskarth from Heat and Planning, and I'm representing Aggregate Industries with regards to this planning application. The concrete products factory at Newbold Quarry produces building materials which are mainly used in the domestic landscaping markets. Local demand for these products has increased significantly in recent years, and whilst trading in 2020 was affected by COVID-19, 2019 sales for the concrete products resulted in an increase in sales forecasts of approximately 16%. This growth is forecast to continue. The site's current permission allows the factory to operate on a 24-hour basis Monday to Friday. However, the factory is not allowed to operate between 1 p.m. on Saturday and 6 a.m. on Monday. This restriction limits the factory's productivity and efficiency, which means that the business cannot meet local demand, and this has resulted in unacceptably lengthy lead times for its valued concrete products. Within this application, Aggregate Industries has applied to extend the operating hours to enable the factory to operate on a 24-hour basis, 7 days per week. In order to enable the factory to manufacture the concrete products, it would also be necessary for a very small number of bulk tankers to deliver cement powder on Sunday mornings and to enable up to 2 items of mobile plant to operate outside in the evenings over the weekend period. It's proposed that these extended hours would be for a temporary period so that it can be demonstrated that the longer working hours do not cause unacceptable effects on neighbouring properties and businesses. Given the nature of the proposal, we're aware that noise is a particular concern. It's important to note that the factory already operates on a 24-hour basis during weekdays and has not received any noise-related complaints in recent years. However, Aggregate Industries acknowledges that background noise levels are lower at the weekend due to there being less traffic on the roads, in this case on the A38. They therefore propose that noise monitoring would be carried out whilst the factory is operating on a 24/7 basis to make sure that it's able to do so without giving rise to unacceptable noise levels. It's proposed that a noise monitoring scheme is agreed with the council and noise monitoring would be undertaken during the 12-month period. If at any time noise is found to be exceeding the current permitted limits or noise complaints are received from neighbours which are shown to be attributable to the factory, then the extended hours arrangement would cease until the cause of the noise has been investigated and appropriately mitigated. This should provide some assurance to residents that during the trial period, noise levels will continue to be monitored and controlled against the current noise limits. With the exception of up to 3 bulk powder tankers, which would make deliveries on Sunday mornings, no changes are proposed to the vehicle movements to or from the factory. Vehicle routing would continue to be in accordance with the Section 106 legal agreement and the additional restrictions set out in the 2020 Traffic Regulation Order. At the end of the 12-month period, the operations would revert back to the current operating hours. If permission is granted for the extended working hours, Aggregate Industries would be able to create a 4th shift, which would provide 7 new jobs, albeit initially on a 12-month basis. This would provide a small but important contribution to the local economy. Clearly, we support the recommendation before you and respectfully ask the committee to grant planning permission, subject to appropriate conditions. In doing so, we confirm that the company's commitment to continue to liaise and work with both the council and the local community to properly control the operation of the site. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your representation. Please stay online until the end, and then if we have any questions that we need to ask of you.
Yes.
In terms of the local member, as I said at the first application, it's Julia Jessel who's the local member. Just to reiterate, she did send an email saying that she's concerned about its effect on local residents. However, and this is the important one again for the second application, they have a liaison quarry meeting which helps mitigate against some of the problems and allow residents to highlight problems. So in terms of this recommendation, in terms of this application, Have we any thoughts from members on this? Phil Hudson was first with his hand up there, and then I've got Paul Snape.
Yeah, you stated that after the temporary 12-month trial that it would revert back to normal. Is that correct, or is it after the 12-month trial, if it's successful, it will continue? You didn't make that quite clear. That was the... And the other thing I'm thinking about is there some compromise that could be made here that it was 24/7 Saturday, but not Sunday as well? And the trial period to me seems quite a long time.
Apologies, I think I may have missed that second point. I'll just be clear now that I did try to explain, unlike the previous report that I presented earlier, this application came forward with a proposal for a 12-month trial, and that they would, after that trial, they would revert to the current hours, so to speak. Obviously, there's a possibility, having done that trial, that they may then, if they prove successful, they may wish to continue. Presumably, if the demand is there as well, that they want to produce and they want that fourth shift, and they would then apply to make that permanent or whatever. Other than that, I'm not sure. There's no change to the vehicle movements other than these extra tanker vehicles, and that essentially what they're seeking to do is continue it's 24/7. So because the problem they find at the moment is shutting down the plant on a Saturday afternoon and Sunday, and then restarting on a Monday is not productive as well. That's another reason why they want to continue through. And as I say, just to bear in mind as well, this will not all operates inside a factory, other than the stockpiling of the blocks outside, and there's limits on the movement of equipment at mobile plant outside during those evenings and at night.
Phil, does that answer your questions? Thank you. Paul?
Thank you, Chair. It's nice to hear a report where the company and the local community actually want to work together. There's already a liaison committee there. They want to do it for a 12-month trial period to see if it works for both sides, really, is the best way to put it. Is it in the interest of the company? Do they get the work they want? And does it work for the local residents? So I think on this occasion, it's a nice report put together for the benefit of all. So thank you.
Thank you, Paul. I've got Jill Waring.
Thank you, Chair. I think I've got the correct place now. I'd like to just ask the representative about the creation of the additional 7 staff. Sorry if you've covered it already, but I am struggling with my hearing set again, as usual. Thank you.
Thank you. Selina, could you just give us a little bit more detail about the 7 jobs that are proposed, please?
Hello, yes. It's really I believe that there are 3 shifts currently working at the moment. To enable the 24/7 working, they would need to create a fourth shift, which would equate to 7 additional jobs. That is, I know that have been questions about the reasoning behind the 12-month period. I think in some respects that is part of the reason why they have proposed a 12-month period rather than, say, for instance, a 3-month period. Because of the creation of those jobs, it's not really feasible to do that on a very short trial period. Over a 12-month period, it would enable that extra shift to be created.
Thank you for the clarification there. Jill, are you happy with that? Thank you. Have we any other representations from members? No. Have we a proposal? I've got one from...
Yeah, I propose that we permit this application.
Okay, thank you, Phil. And seconded by, I think this time, Richard Cox. Thank you. Could we have a show of hands, please? Again, unanimous. Thank you very much, Selina, and thank you, members. We'll now move on to item number 5, which is, this is not on the, this is public. Yeah. Item number 5, Planning Policy and Development Control Performance Report 2021 and 21-22 Quarter 2. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So as you can see there, this is a rather belated report on the previous financial year, 2020-21, but also an opportunity to bring us up to date in terms of Q2 of this year. So the report looks at three areas: policy making, development control, staffing, and our new IT system, just to bring you up to date with that, having previously mentioned it before. So in terms of policy making, which is page 77 of the report pack, I reported previously that we produced and completed our 16th annual monitoring report, which was reported last December. That report looks at what's happening from a policy point of view, so it considers things like mineral demand, mineral supply, production from sites and what have you, to see how the allocations and what have you, what impact it's had on that, and also how our policies are operating. And we concluded at that time that our policies in our minerals plan and our waste plan were working effectively, and there was no need to review them at that stage. I would add that work on preparing for the review of those local plans is currently on hold due to staffing, but also due to the government's taking a fresh look at a planning reform white paper that might have an impact on plan making generally, which will have an indirect or have an effect on what we do going forward as well. So this slide looks at development control performance for 2020-21. This is Appendix 2 in the report, and shows that we're performing well in terms of speed and quality of our development control decision making. The top line is the speed, so that's determining applications within 13 weeks or 16 weeks for an environmental statement application. And you can see that 23 out of the 24 applications were determined on time or with an agreed extension of time from the applicant. The one that wasn't was an application we refused that the applicant didn't agree to an extension of time, surprisingly. In terms of delegated powers, I'll mention that one. As a percentage, we're at 87%, whereas the target is 80%. But given that the number of applications determined was 31, it only takes a small change for that percentage to have dropped nearer to 80%. So if it had been 25 out of 31, it would have been 80.6%, for example. This slide shows a comparison with where we were in the previous 2 years. And it shows that the number of mineral waste decisions during 2021 was almost the same as the year before, but was down on that 2 years before that, 23 compared to 24, and 31 the year before that. From other data, I know that the overall total number of cases received, applications, submissions, consultations, was up compared to the previous 2 years, 165 compared to 136 and 215. Notably, the number of applications received has remained about 30 for the past few years, but submissions of detail were up last year, 85 compared to 60. And this slide brings us more up to date in terms of quarters 1 and 2 of this financial year. And at the end of quarter 2, the total number of cases received was down compared to the same period in the previous 2 years. No, it doesn't. That's not the right slide. That's the one. So that shows the comparison and the number of cases. I do know, say, from other information that the number of cases is down compared to previous 2 years. Finally, I'll move on to staffing, and just to point out that this slide shows our current staffing arrangement, which has been affected by the COVID pandemic, but despite of this, and supported by our recent temporary recruitment, we've managed to maintain our good performance. The plans are in place to provide more resilience in the future. Finally, I'd just like to let members know that we've finally introduced our new IT system in July 2021. Took a little while to get there, but we are there. We moved over 9,000 records and about 100,000 associated documents into the new system. And it's the first time we're connected directly with the National Planning Portal when applications are made to us. The system also supports new web pages to view and comment on plan applications, and supports a new pre-application service portal for applicants to submit pre-application requests for pre-application advice to us. So, Chairman, that is a brief report just updating where we are in terms of performance over the last year and up to date in this year. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Mike. David.
Can we commend Mr. Grundy on his excellent report and the performance report that we've received today, and also thank the team for the excellent job that they do, often in very difficult situations, and to note the report, Chairman.
Push the right button, it might work better. Yeah, I get that. just a couple of words from me as chairman. We don't often in the county council see 100%, and it's really good to see 100%. And when it's not been 100%, there's been a reason why it's not 100%. So, as chairman and as a county councillor, I would thank the yourselves and the team for doing a splendid job. It's just that you have to keep on now to 100%. So well done. We've got a proposal that we accept the report from David Smith, a seconder from Paul Snape, sorry, and a third with Mike Sutherland again. Please put your hands up and agree with me what a great job they've done. Thank you. Brilliant. And now we'll move on to the annual report, and I've not heard one of these before, the safety of sports grounds, April 20 to March 2021. Now we've got Trish Caldwell with us, who's the Community Commission Regulatory Services and Community Safety Officer. So that's probably one of the longest titles in the county. And Mark Wilson, I understand, who is the Technical and Business Manager for Trading Standards. I don't know who's going to give the report, but Trish, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I'll start, and as you said, Mark Wilson has joined me, and Mark will answer any of the questions, if you have questions during the report, because obviously Mark is very versed in the operation. So I don't plan to read through the whole report, Chair, but if I could just highlight some points. So in introduction, the report is prepared annually and informs the Committee of the Safety of Sports Grounds work that's been completed in the last financial year. It describes the County Council's statutory obligations, and it outlines the activity that's taken place to ensure those duties have been met. It also advises the Committee of the future workload that will ensure that we continue to meet statutory obligations. Members will have noted that this report also covers activity carried out in this current year. This seemed appropriate for the report because, as you will be aware, that in response to the COVID pandemic from the 24th of March 2020, the government introduced legislation that required the closure of most leisure venues and included all the premises regulated under the sports ground legislation. This resulted in a restriction on spectators attending sporting and similar events. And then the legislation was amended to allow socially distanced spectators back into sports grounds, and then venues have started to operate with spectators back in attendance from May 2021. So as background, Section 2 of the report explains about the County Council's responsibilities for administering the Safety of Sports Grounds Act 1975 and also the Fire Safety and Safety at Sports Ground Act of 1987. The duty relates to designated grounds, which are sports grounds with a capacity over 10,000. That's actually 5,000 for football. And they require a safety certificate granted by the local authority. Here, that relates to Burton Albion only. And then sports stadiums with a covered stand of capacity of over 500 standing or seated spectators, known as a regulatory stand, requires a safety certificate also. We have 7 of these, and they're detailed at 2.4 in the report. In terms of risk assessment, we cover this in section 3 of the report, and that explains how we meet our duties with regard to periodical inspections, and it covers the criteria that we use to assess those sites. And then sections 4 and 5 actually move into how we've applied those risk ratings to the different sites. Moving on to section 6, this details the work with Burton Albion. Now, due to the pandemic, the ground was closed to spectators. However, you've probably read in the report, officers have spent considerable time working with the club, and we've got considerable more activity planned through the coming months. And this is sort of referenced in the report at section 6. We've got a safety audit at the Burton Albion taking place next week, actually. 9th of December is our next audit. So we've done work in preparation to that. Section 6 also details work that we've done at regulated stands, and in line with the COVID legislation, were also closed from March 2020. So therefore, the formal inspection programme was put on hold. However, engagement with those venues has continued. We've done emails, we've done lots of telephone, and we've done virtual meetings. The report outlines the plans that we have for this year, and the inspection plans are included as an appendix. The report also references the Ironman event. You know that it was cancelled for June 2020, eventually rescheduled, and then it took place on Sunday the 18th of July this year. And we also highlight at section 8 the forthcoming Commonwealth Games and the engagement that we're having as part of the Cannock Chase mountain bike event, and preparations are well underway for that. I would draw members' attention to section 9, which highlights the resources drawn from the team, and we draw those from the Trading Standards team for this period. And it is worthy to note that the Trading Standards team have undergone a restructure. The restructure took place and happened in January 2021. So the responsibility within Trading Standards for the safety of sports grounds moved to Mark at that point, and hence him attending today. However, just to reassure members that Tony Shaw, our Trading Standards manager, continues to support during this transition period. He's still engaged with the work, and I should say that during this financial year, 2021, we have dedicated more resources to date to the safety of sports grounds activity. You know, from the COVID pandemic, the work that is needing to be done around making sure the new legislation and requirements are included with all of our sports grounds. We also, at section 10, refer specifically to the SGSA audit that took place in October 2020. There were a number of recommendations from that. These have been completed. Lots of work has been done with Burton Albion and in conjunction with Burton Albion. And we've also included those recommendations for completeness as an appendix. We have included what has been required of us because of the additional of the coronavirus requirements. And I think in conclusion, it's fair to say 2021 was quite challenging for the team because of the changes that the safety management required following the coronavirus, together with the restructure. However, existing qualified officers have and will continue to provide that support for the new officers we're introducing into this to give us a smooth transition, with the view that the safety of sports grounds resource that's required will draw from a bigger pool of trading standards officers so that we have more resilience in the system going forward. Work is progressing well and is on track for the planned inspections and related activities for this current year. And that concludes what I wish to say, Chair. Thank you. I would invite if there are any questions or comments.
Thank you. Any comments from yourself as well? Thank you. Incredibly difficult times, and that's obviously appreciated. Have we anything from the floor? David Smith first, please.
Only just a quick point, Chairman. When we're checking the safety of sports grounds, where there is secondary activities that take place at the sports ground, I'm thinking of conferences at, say, Uttoxeter, or maybe also at Burton, do we check the security and the safety of those, or is that a separate issue?
Thank you, Chair. It's part of the suite of the conversation and engagement we have about the safe use of the facilities, and it would depend on whether the regulated stand was in use, for example, at Uttoxeter, but it's a separate issue for operating those particular events, but we are aware of and given an opportunity to comment on the safe planning of which, just to ensure that those participating or spectating at that particular point are considered.
Thank you. Paul?
Having been involved in policing public order situations, really the Bradford fire, then an undercover operation in Wolves Hooligans in '87, then part of the Hillsborough inquiry, I know the importance of the work you do, really, how it affects large groups of people, families, when things go wrong. So the resources need to be there. We've got to get it right first time every time, because when we think Hillsborough was 89, we're still going on with it now, really. It's not come to an end. I've got a meeting next week with the Independent Officer of Police Complaints about it all still. So I know how long it's going on and the cost it's taken for police. So the last thing we really want is anything to go wrong with it and cost the county money. So can I just thank you for all the work you do on behalf of everybody.
Just a quick word from me as well, and obviously as we're still in the pandemic, we still don't know what's going to happen in the future, but whether it's officers at the County Council or officers at football clubs or even the County Showground, it has been exceedingly challenging times, and I think the important thing for us as members is to hear what's been done. I think it's important that we appreciate how difficult times have been, and as Paul said, we can never relax, because we've got examples in the very recent past of what can go wrong in mass gatherings of people. So from myself and from the committee, I think the feeling is that a great job well done, but still a great job to be done as we go forward into the future. So well done. Can I have a proposal that we accept the report from Mike Sutherland and seconded by Jill Waring? Oh, I think Mike actually put his hand up to speak. Would you like to speak before we vote on it?
Thank you, Chair, and I endorse everything that's been said by colleagues this morning. I do have just, if I may, take the opportunity to talk about the Commonwealth Games and the impact that it's going to have in Cannock Chase. And just for the record, the part of Cannock Chase where all this activity is going to take place is part of my division. Now, for me, and for the residents, it's going to be critical. That issue for us will be the local traffic management and enforcement. And what I would ask, if you could, through you, Chair, is that we liaise with Brindley Heath Parish Council, who tend to get belated notification, and it normally comes via Cannock Chase Council or Rugeley Town Council. But based on this report and the work that you obviously have done incredibly well, could I ask that we to the fore on this. It's the usual, myself and Brindley Heath, whenever we have issues, come to us first, and then we have to go backwards. But again, I fully endorse the comments that have been made earlier. Great report, and thank you for what you do. Thank you, Chair.
Would you like to comment on that?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I will. I'm the Chair of the Safety Advisory Group for that particular event. I can give you the assurances that the plans and conversations are well in advance, particularly from what else is going on in the West Midlands at the moment. There is conversations around what the event site looks like, what the Zone X looks like, business as usual, roles and responsibilities, and there is a planned engagement piece to do that community impact assessment. For me, it's not going to be soon enough, but I will take back the question because I think it's planned for May. I think that's a bit too late. So if I can give you some assurances that I will take that back as chair and take an action to engage with the organising committee and those who are proposing to do that bit of work to reach out as soonest to the likes of yourselves and Brindley Heath Parish Council and other affected areas, just to understand what those issues and how we can work through that.
Through you, Chair, can I thank the response, and we look forward to working with you.
As we continue on, Mike, are you happy to propose the
More than
report?
happy, yes.
Thank you. And Jill to second it. And can we have a show of hands from committee? Yeah, unanimous again. Thank you both very much for that.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, members. Thank you.
And we move on to item number 7, please, which is Countryside Rights of Way Panel Constitution Change. And I think Zach's going to take this one.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. I think the report is reasonably self-explanatory. Over the last few meetings of the Countryside and Rights of Way Panel, it's been a general consensus to try and increase the membership from 5 members. There's been a number of apologies, and when you've only got 2 or 3 members in the room, the panel feel it's not ideal to be dealing with these issues. So the report is basically seeking the parent committee's views on the request, and then requesting the recommendation to be sent to the County Council, as it is a constitution update.
This is something we've discussed in depth before. Does anyone really want to bring anything else up? David?
Only, Chairman, that because it's a quasi-legal panel, that any member that's appointed to sit on it needs to go through the training.
Thank you. Point well made. Can we have a show of hands just to acknowledge that the report as we are at the moment? Thank you. At which point we've got no exclusion of the public. So can I thank officers, can I thank members for coming out, particularly on a day like this. And if anyone's still online, thank the people online for their contributions. Thank you very much, and see you next week at full council.